Have you ever been turned into an outsider by your own in-laws, right in the middle of a lavish party you only came to because of your daughter's message? They looked at you as if you were beneath them, sneered at your background, mocked you for a simple gift, and even openly told you to leave the table. But they had no idea that just one trivial incident on the highway, fleeting like a speck of dust, would become the very thing no one could have expected that night. Only a few hours later, from the position of an old man humiliated, I became the reason an entire powerful family trembled, while those who held their heads high with money had to bow down in disgrace. Before I tell you the full truth of that birthday night, where justice appeared in a form no one could have imagined, hit subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. If it were you, would you quietly walk away, or would you stay to turn humiliation into a weapon that makes those who scorned you pay the price? That morning I sat in the small kitchen of my suburban home in Ashton, Colorado, where sunlight filtered through a faded green curtain, painting scattered squares on the surface of an old wooden table. The coffee pot on the gas stove clicked, signaling the bitter warmth about to fill the room. I turned a newspaper page, tired eyes stopping at the sports column, the only part that still made me feel connected to the outside world. 3 years had passed since my wife died, and nothing in this house had changed. The wedding photo on the wall, the pendulum clock that ticked off beat, and the set of glass cups she left behind. They weren't valuable things, but they were proof that I still existed, still clung to small habits nobody noticed. For a 63-year-old man, sometimes that was enough. The phone rang, slicing the quiet like a knife through the air. I startled, spilling a few drops of coffee on the paper. The number on the screen wasn't familiar, but my heart knew before I answered. Charles Vennet, my son-in-law, a man who never called me unless forced to. I picked up. Mr. Hale. His voice was flat, cold, polite to the point of being fake. Charles, I answered, steadying myself. What's going on? A pause. I imagined Charles standing in his glass office, tie pulled tight, annoyed that he had to speak to someone he despised. My mother, Claudia, wants you at her birthday dinner tonight. He pressed each word like reciting a duty. Oh! I nodded, even though he couldn't see. Actually, don't misunderstand, Charles cut in. It wasn't my idea. Emily, my wife, insisted that you be there. I'm only doing what she asked. I stayed silent for a few seconds. In that silence, the offbeat pendulum hammered in my ears, reminding me I was just an outsider in my daughter's family. Where is it? I asked. Briarwood Country Club, 7 o'clock. You should know the place has its own standards. His voice dropped, icy. Dress code, business casual. Don't embarrass us. Each word hit like a stone breaking the surface of water, sending cold ripples through my chest. Business casual. Standards. Please don't embarrass us. They all meant the same. You don't belong. Before I could respond, the line went dead. The monotone dial tone echoed in the kitchen, making it feel emptier. I set the phone down, my hand trembling, not from fear, but from memories returning. The first time I met Claudia and Robert, Charles's parents, they looked at me like a misplaced item in a luxury store, a grease-stained mechanic, unfit to stand beside the Vennet name. I moved to the window. Outside, the pines swayed, reminding me that time moved on regardless of my son-in-law's disdain. Emily, my daughter, wanted me there. That alone was reason enough to consider it. On the table, today's paper still lay open, the finance section showing bold letters, Harper and Company, Ventures, leading investment fund of the West. A headline, Major investor gathering at Briarwood. I skimmed it and folded the paper. I didn't know then that the name would change my life in one night. I took a sip of bitter coffee. Maybe I would go, not for Charles, not for Claudia, for Emily. I had no idea that call was the opening shot of a silent but fierce war, one where an ordinary father like me would face an arrogant, wealthy clan and turn the tables in a way no one foresaw. I sat still long after the call ended, until the harsh clang of the pendulum clock jarred me like waking from a dream. 7 o'clock, less than 10 hours to turn an old man in a faded shirt into a business casual guest at Briarwood Country Club. The thought was absurd, but Emily asked, and if my daughter wanted it, I would go. I opened the oak wardrobe in the bedroom. The hinge creaked. Shirts hung in a neat row but worn. A green plaid I wore to church, a white one yellowed, and a navy one that still held some shape. I pulled it out, held it to the light. The fabric was soft from dozens of washes, but still decent. If Martha were alive, she'd smile, iron it, and make it crisp again. Is this all? I muttered and sighed. People say clothes don't make a man, but at Briarwood, clothes decide if they'll let you through the door. On the shelf, a pair of black leather shoes lay dusty. I wiped them, revealing cracks like veins. They would have to do. I couldn't compete with the Venet's bespoke suits, but at least I wouldn't look sloppy. Folding the shirt on the bed, I remembered my first dinner with Claudia and Robert at an Italian restaurant in Denver. I wore my only intact white shirt, but Claudia's eyes scanned me, stopping at the oil marks on my hands. I had come straight from the shop. Emily had joked, "Dad can fix anything if you hand it to him." Claudia smirked. How practical? Her voice stretched the last word as if practical meant cheap. Robert shook my hand, out of duty, his eyes already moving elsewhere, as though I didn't exist. That memory lingered like salt in a wound. And tonight, I would enter their world again. Not for acceptance, only for my daughter. By noon, I grabbed my wallet. $82 cash inside. The pension money stretched thin if I was careful. I thought of a birthday gift. They say gifts show thought, not price. But Claudia would weigh every penny. Perfume? Too expensive. Foreign wine? Out of reach. I told myself something simple yet tasteful might preserve my dignity. I drove my 2010 Ford Fusion to the mall. The road stretched under a pale sky, autumn leaves yellow on the roadside. Kids tugged their mothers into toy stores. I walked into the mall like a man stepping onto a stage where he didn't belong. At the perfume counter, thick scents made me dizzy. Prices, $120, $200, and up. I stepped back. At the handbag display, a clerk smiled professionally, but when she heard my budget, her eyes flickered with pity. Between $50 and $75, I said honestly. She nodded without mockery and guided me to a shelf of crystal photo frames. She took out a silver photo frame, simple yet elegant. I picked it up, felt its weight in my hand. Not flashy, but decent enough. $70. My heart twinged, but then I nodded. I'll take this one. As she wrapped the gift, I suddenly remembered the last birthday party of Claudia that Emily had described. A banquet with hundreds of guests, expensive champagne and fresh flowers covering the hall. And me? A $70 photo frame bought with a meager pension? I knew it would never impress anyone. But I wasn't going there to impress. I was going for Emily. Back home, I placed the gift box on the table. A shirt, leather shoes, and a photo frame. All my preparations for the evening. Not much, but enough to walk in with my head held high. My phone buzzed. A message from Emily. "Dad, I really hope you'll be there tonight. Don't worry about them. I just need you." I sat still, reading it over and over. In that moment, I knew every humiliation, every sneer I was about to face would all be worth it, as long as Emily felt her father was still by her side. I remembered when Emily was 8, one rainy afternoon. She came home with red, swollen eyes after being left out by her friends. I had held her close, wiped away her tears, and told her, "I can't stop the world from hurting you, but I promise, whenever you need me, I'll be there." She had looked up, eyes innocent, trusting me completely. From then on, that promise became an invisible thread, binding my heart. And tonight, when Emily said she just needed me to be there, I knew I couldn't back down, no matter how much scorn awaited me. Ever since Emily married Charles, I knew things between us and his family would never be smooth. A year after the wedding, Robert and Claudia once suggested I persuade the neighbors to sell our farmland cheaply so they could build a project. I refused. I could never trade Martha's memory for profit. From that moment, their eyes changed, from polite to contemptuous. To them, I was no longer an in-law, just an obstacle. Next to Emily's message, the morning newspaper still lay on the table, its finance section bold with words about an investment fund. I folded it, paying no attention. Afternoon sank slowly over the road leading to I-70, the sun leaning toward the Rockies, painting Ashton in weary orange. I started up my 2010 Ford Fusion. The engine rattled, rough but steady, like me after all these years. On the passenger seat sat the gift box with the silver frame, ribbon creased, but still my small source of pride. In the rearview mirror, I saw an older man with graying hair, a navy shirt ironed as flat as possible, and deep eyes, tired yet steady. I drew a long breath. Don't let them see fear. The old radio played a country song about long roads and journeys. I smiled. On the way to Briarwood, I would think only of Emily. My daughter needed me there, and that was enough. About 40 miles later, as twilight painted the sky purple, I saw a silver Mercedes S-Class stopped on the shoulder, hazard lights flashing, hood raised. Beside it stood a silver-haired woman in a navy blazer, staring helplessly into the engine bay, phone in hand. I signaled and pulled over. My mechanic's instinct wouldn't let me drive on. I rolled the window down and called out, "Car trouble?" She turned. She was around 60, her face carrying the grace of someone used to grand hauls and million-dollar deals. But now her eyes showed worry. Yes, it just died suddenly. All the warning lights came on at once. I called roadside service, but they're tied up and don't know when they can come. I'm in a hurry. I really don't know what to do. I cut the engine and stepped out. My old shoes slid on the gravel. I reached out, smiling warmly. Martin Hale. I was a mechanic for more than 40 years. If you trust me, I can take a look. She shook my hand firmly, not soft at all. Evelyn Harper, a pleasure. I'd be very grateful if you helped her name slipped past me like any other. I opened my trunk, took out my old toolkit, something I never traveled without. In the side compartment, I kept odds and ends, a worn belt still usable, a refurbished alternator I'd tinkered with on quiet evenings. Habit taught me, on the road, anything can happen. A few bolts later, I saw the problem. Broken water pump, slipped belt, dead alternator. I whistled low. Not simple, but I can patch it enough for you to get a few dozen miles, at least to the nearest garage. Evelyn watched, her eyes curious, not pitying. You still have the skill after all these years? I shrugged. Machines are honest. When they break, they say it straight, unlike people who fake politeness. She laughed, a real laugh, not social. Courtesy I worked, sunset light spilling into the engine bay, glowing on my oil-stained hands. Sweat ran down my neck, but my movements were steady, like every roadside rescue I'd done before. Evelyn stayed nearby, quietly handing me tissues or water. After nearly an hour, I fitted the spare belt, rewired the circuit, and replaced the alternator. I closed the hood, exhaled. All right, try it now. Evelyn slid behind the wheel and turned the key. The engine roared, then steadied into a smooth hum. Her face lit up. Wonderful. You really saved me. I shook my head, wiping my hands. Just experience. You'll need a new pump and alternator soon. This won't last long. Of course. But today, thanks to you, I can keep going. She reached into her wallet and pulled out a $100 bill. I waved it away. No need. I don't need money. Surprised, she said. At least let me pay for the parts. Those came from a junkyard, fixed up just in case. Hardly cost anything. She paused, looking at me intently. Not Claudia's judging glare, but a straight, respectful gaze. Then, give me your number. I want to stay in touch. You don't meet people every day who'll give up an hour on the highway for a stranger. I hesitated, then recited my number. She saved it, called to confirm, and my phone rang with her name. Evelyn Harper. I smiled lightly. So now I have a new friend on the road. We shook hands again. As Evelyn drove off toward Dublin, Colorado, her taillights faded into the dark. I stood for a moment, feeling both warmth from being needed and dread knowing I'd be late to the party. I checked my watch. Nearly 7. I'd be at least an hour late. Sweat and engine grease still on my shirt. But I didn't regret it. I'd chosen right, helping someone instead of rushing to a party where I wasn't welcome. I restarted the Ford and continued toward the distant glow of town. When the dashboard clock struck 8:15, I turned into the vast grounds of Briarwood Country Club. Night had fallen. Headlights swept across rows of neatly trimmed maples, like soldiers at attention, the smooth asphalt, leading to mansions glowing gold. I parked the battered Fusion among gleaming BMWs, Lexuses, Range Rovers, and the newest Teslas. My car was a sparrow among peacocks. I picked up the gift box, its creased ribbon making it look even cheaper. The smell of machine oil lingered on my shirt, though I had tried to wipe it clean. I drew a deep breath, straightened my back, and walked toward the grand entrance. Glass doors opened, releasing piano notes and laughter. As I stepped onto the marble floor, the first eyes to find me were Claudia Vanette's. She wore an emerald velvet gown, the chandelier light sparkling on her perfectly painted face. Her eyes narrowed, then curved into a half-smile, not of joy, but as if she'd spotted a stain on her tablecloth. "Oh, Mr. Hale." Her voice rang coldly, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. What a surprise. Nearly 2 hours late, I kept calm and held out the gift box. "Happy birthday, Mrs. Venett. I meant to arrive earlier, but something came up on the road." She took the gift between 2 fingers, as if afraid it might soil her nails. "I see." Her eyes flicked over my shirt, catching the faint oil stain. "We'll look at it later." She tilted her head, calling out, "Robert, Charles, our guest has arrived." From the living room, Robert stepped out. He was tall, with neatly combed silver hair, a tidy suit, and a glass of wine in hand. Charles followed, his tie pulled tight, his face taut like a drawn string. Charles's gaze swept over me, a mix of irritation and embarrassment. "Dear father-in-law," Robert rasped, "we had already started and did not see you." "People are right. Everyone is punctual. Only a few think their time is more valuable than others." I opened my mouth. "Actually, "No need to explain," Robert cut in. "What matters is that you're here. Although," he glanced at my clothes, lips curling, "it seems Briarwood's dress standards have not yet reached Ashton." Charles interjected, voice full of implication. "Dad, my parents had to host guests in your place. You know this is not just a birthday dinner. There are many important people I had no time to answer before another voice sounded from the stairs. "Dad!" Emily rushed over, a blue dress highlighting her slender frame. Her face lit up at the sight of me, then quickly shadowed with sadness at my disheveled state. She hugged me tightly, ignoring the smell of engine oil. "I was worried," I texted, and you did not reply. I patted her back, whispering, "I'm fine. I helped someone on the road, so I am a little late." Emily looked up, eyes full of gratitude. But immediately Claudia cut in, her voice like a blade. "Helping? Yes." "How characteristic?" "Unfortunately, our guests here do not appreciate that particular characteristic." She flicked her eyes as a signal, and I noticed many guests had stopped talking and turned their attention toward me. Expensive formal wear, glimmering wine glasses, everything fell silent as if watching a bad play. Robert folded his arms, speaking just loudly enough for the whole room. "Mr. Hale, to be honest, with you appearing like this, we can hardly seat you at the main table. Perhaps you will be more comfortable in the lounge at the back." His tone was an expulsion order. Emily blanched and hurried to say, "Dad is my guest of honor. He sits with me." Charles glanced at his wife. lowering his voice but still loud enough for me to hear. "Emily, please do not make this difficult." We must keep face. I stood in the middle of the room, every gaze converging, my heart pounding. I remembered Evelyn Harper, the woman I had just helped on the highway. She had looked at me differently, with respect. Here they looked at me like excess, baggage. I swallowed, forcing calm. "If I am making everyone uncomfortable," I said slowly, "I will sit anywhere." As long as Emily is happy, Claudia's lip lifted, satisfied as if winning a chess move. "Good. At least you know your limits." A murmur rose from a corner. A few younger guests smirked. A woman whispered to her friend, eyes fixed on the faint stain on my shirt. I felt each glance like pins against my skin. Emily squeezed my hand and whispered, "Do not mind them. I am here, but I knew my heart had been torn again. I had come only so my daughter would not feel alone. Yet the moment I entered, they turned me into an outcast." Amid hushed whispers, stifled laughter, and clinking glasses, I understood the night would be long, and the humiliation had only begun. A server in a black vest led me toward a row of seats by the glass wall, far from the long, white-clothed table where Claudia sat at the center. I followed in silence, my footsteps echoing on marble like the reverberation of disgrace. Every passing glance was an invisible blade, slicing the thin fabric of my pride. I sat on a wooden chair, back straight, the small gift box on my lap. Through the clear glass, warm lights spread over the golf course like another world, peaceful and distant, while inside, the air thickened like a courtroom. Claudia raised her glass, her voice high. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate. It is an honor to be surrounded by friends, partners, and beloved family." She emphasized family and flicked a look at me, as if to remind everyone of the contrast. Some are acknowledged, others merely tolerated. Laughter rippled and glasses chimed. I clenched my jaw in silence. A salt and pepper man nearby leaned toward his companion, trying to speak softly but loud enough for me. "Who is that? Maintenance?" The other replied, "No, I hear he is Charles's father-in-law." Both snorted. I did not turn, only tightened my grip on the gift until the ribbon was about to snap. From the main table, Emily glanced back at me, pleading, but Charles gripped her hand, forcing her to face forward. I knew she wanted to stand and bring me over, but she was trapped in her in-law's vice. I did not blame her. My chest only grew heavier. Robert stood and began to boast about a new construction project. His voice rang through the hall. "We have achieved much, thanks to the support of influential investors. And of course, we always maintain high standards, from work to private life." His eyes paused on me when he said, "standards," drawing soft chuckles. I knew that to them I met no standard at all. A server passed and set a glass of wine before me. I lifted it. The red liquid caught the light. I thought of the faint smell of oil still on my hands, and set the glass down. Fine wine or well water, it made no difference. What stuck in my throat was not the drink, but the barrage of looks. A middle-aged woman wearing pearls deliberately raised. Her voice. "I heard Mr. Hale used to work at the town's auto shop. How interesting. We rarely have people from that field here." The words were sweet, but barbed. I gave a thin smile. "Yes, for over 40 years. When cars break, they need fixing. Rich or poor, alike." She faltered, then forced a laugh. But Claudia slid in, "Admirable, truly. But tonight, let us leave. Machinery outside, shall we?" Tittering followed. I looked around the opulent room where everyone was sharply dressed and spoke in polished phrases, but the grander it seemed, the colder their eyes looked. I no longer felt I was at a birthday celebration, but at a covert trial, with Claudia as judge, Robert as prosecutor, Charles as complicit silent partner, and me, the defendant awaiting sentence. Dishes arrived, roast beef on white porcelain, sauce gleaming under the lights. Cutlery chimed with lively chatter. I ate slowly, each bite bland, tasting only bitterness. Now and then guests glanced at me as if I were a sideshow. Amid the talk of deals, I suddenly heard a name. Harper and Company. A young guest spoke excitedly about an investment. I froze. The name felt familiar, like something from this morning's paper. I brushed it off as a coincidence. I did not know it would be the key to everything about to unfold. Emily looked back again, her eyes shining with shame at how her husband's family treated her father. I nodded and gave her a tired, reassuring smile. Wherever I sat, however they treated me, I was still her father. I would endure so she would not feel alone. That promise had never changed. From the old bedroom in Ashton to Briarwood's grand hall, from knowing I would be humiliated to this very moment, I kept going for one reason. Tonight, my daughter needed her father. And as long as Emily needed me, I would sit here, even if the whole world pushed me aside. The wall clock neared 9 as Claudia rose from the main table. She tapped a silver spoon against a crystal glass, the clear ring silencing the hall at once. Eyes turned to her, waiting, like for a judge's verdict. I still sat by the glass wall, a solitary chair apart, like an uninvited witness. Claudia lifted her red wine high, her voice carrying, "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to thank you all for being here tonight. My 60th birthday would not be complete without the love of family and friends. And of course, we are honored to host important business partners who share the Vennet family's vision." Applause reigned, glasses clinked. Claudia smiled slightly, then suddenly turned her gaze to me. "And naturally," she continued, slowing her voice like drawing out a blade, "tonight we also have even more special guests. Some people are here not for contracts or influence, but simply for blood." A brief hush. Then she lifted her chin and enunciated, "Please welcome Martin Hale, the father-in-law of Charles." The whole hall turned at once. I stood up on instinct, my hand gripping the photo frame gift box. Scattered applause flickered, weak and insincere. A young man at the next table let out a mocking whistle. I clearly heard a few whispers. "Him!" The one sitting alone out there? Claudia still did not stop. She set down her glass, her eyes glinting like a cat toying with a mouse. "Mr. Hale has arrived, though. Nearly 2 hours late. I suppose you have a valid reason, yes?" I drew a deep breath, my voice calm. "I helped someone on the road, so I'm late." "I apologize if I caused trouble." Robert gave a dry laugh and cut in. "Helped someone? How characteristic, just like when you clung to those barren acres and delayed our multi-million-dollar project. You always replace reality with sentiment." Snickers rose from a few corners. Blood rushed to my face, but I held back. Emily's worried eyes followed me, her lips trembling as if to speak, but Charles gripped her hand hard, holding her down. Claudia took another step, her velvet gown glittering under the lights. "And the gift?" she asked, her voice shrill. I held the box toward the head table. A staffer quickly carried it up and set it before her. Claudia untied the ribbon and opened the box. When the silver frame appeared, the hall seemed to hold its breath. Only a few seconds passed before laughter burst from a corner. A woman murmured loudly enough, "A photo frame? From a discount store?" Claudia lifted the frame high, crystal light flashing off it. "Lovely," she said, her tone icy. "Simple. Very modest. But I suppose with an auto mechanic's wage, this is the best one can do." Laughter broke out, some trying to stifle it, but unable to hide the contempt. I stood still, each word like a needle through my chest. Emily shot to her feet, but Charles yanked her back down and hissed, "Do you want to ruin everything?" I looked at my daughter, then around the bright room. Gowns and tuxedos, glistening wine glasses. In that moment, I wanted to leave, to walk out and abandon all of it. But Emily's voice rose in my memory, that rainy afternoon long ago. "Dad, please never leave me alone." That promise kept me standing. I lifted my head, said nothing, and let silence answer their sneers. Robert took another sip of wine and leaned toward Claudia. "At least he showed up." but I think it is better to seat him in the lounge. That way, everyone will be more comfortable." Once more, murmurs of agreement spread through the hall. Claudia nodded lightly and turned to the staff. "Escort Mr. Hale to the back area. He will surely find it more suitable." Emily sprang up, eyes brimming. "No, my father stays here with me." But Robert blocked her, his voice authoritarian. "Emily, sit down." "This is not up for discussion." I stood in the middle of the room, under dozens of stares, like hundreds of arrows about to pierce me. My heart clenched, but I still stepped back, slowly. The air was heavy, the whispers chasing me like indictments. Tonight, I was no longer a guest. I was a living sentence for their contempt, and I understood I had reached the bottom of humiliation. The music still played, but no one truly listened. I retreated toward the back, trying to keep my balance under the prying eyes. My heart thudded as if every vessel beat out a verdict. Emily collapsed into her chair, her shaking hand rubbing a napkin, eyes red as she watched me. I knew she wanted to run to me, but Charles held her like a clamp, his face cold as marble. I turned, about to step through the glass doors leading to the corridor, but just then the door chime rang, clear, long, and sharp, like a blade slashing the heavy air. Everyone turned toward the foyer. Claudia frowned, Robert set his wine down, and Charles jumped up, striding quickly to the door. Through the clear glass, the silhouette of a luxury car stopped at the portico. A graceful figure stepped out, exterior lights glinting on silver hair. I held my breath. It was her, the woman I met on the highway, the one whose tangled belts and dead engine had cost me nearly 2 hours to revive. Evelyn Harper. I still remember the clasp of her hand in thanks, the bright sincerity in her eyes. And now she stood on the Venet's threshold, at the very party where I was treated as an outsider. The doors opened. Charles hesitated, then forced a smile. Claudia shot to her feet, her voice suddenly syrupy. "My goodness, Mrs. Harper, what an honor to have you." A ripple of whispers swept the room. Everyone recognized the name. Evelyn Harper, the chair of Harper and Company Ventures, the investment fund mentioned in this morning's paper, the name I had glanced at and ignored. She entered, posture straight, the natural bearing of someone used to rooms, holding their breath when she arrived. Her heels clicked lightly on the marble, each step seeming to make the hall tremble. Evelyn's gaze moved across the room, paused on Claudia, then slid to Robert. She offered them a cordial, polite smile, cool in temperature. Then, as if current passed through the air, her eyes found me, the man standing in the shadows, shirt still marked with a smear of oil, gift box still in hand. She stopped, her eyes suddenly lighting. "Mr. Hale," her voice rang out, clear and carrying. The entire room froze. I watched dozens of heads swivel from her to me and back again, as if to confirm they had not misheard. Evelyn strode over, her face opening into a genuine smile, the first true smile I had seen all night. "It is wonderful to see you again. I still do not know how to properly thank you for what happened this afternoon." The whispers cracked open. Robert went rigid, his glass nearly slipping. Claudia's smile twisted, struggling to remain polite. Emily gaped, her eyes flooding with hope, while Charles stood as if rooted to the spot. Evelyn turned to the hall, her voice warm yet edged. "On my way here, my car died right on the highway. I called for assistance, but they said it would be hours. I was truly desperate until he, Mr. Hale, pulled over, rolled up his sleeves, and after nearly 2 hours, got me running again. He even refused payment. Without him, I would not be here tonight." Her words were crisp, nothing extra, like an indictment overturning every earlier sneer. The atmosphere changed at once. Some guests gaped, a few pressed hands to their chests and murmured. I caught Robert's gaze, drained of color. Claudia forced a clap, the sound dry as sticks. Evelyn turned back to me with a kindly smile. "Mr. Hale, do not stand there. Please sit with me," she signaled the staff, pointing to a seat beside the place of honor. The whole hall gasped. I stood motionless, my chest swelling as if to burst. I had never imagined the humiliation that had swallowed me could pivot in a single moment. Emily raised a hand to her mouth, her eyes brimming with belief. I saw her whisper, "I told you." Robert stumbled in. Mrs. Harper, in fact, Mr. Hale, is merely an aside. But Evelyn cut him off, her gaze sharp as a blade. An aside? A man who spent nearly 2 hours helping a stranger on the highway, refused a single dollar, is an aside. Mr. Vennet, if your definition of human worth is measured only by a clock and the price of a gift, then I must reconsider why I'm here. Her voice was not loud, but it was precise, freezing the room. I stood there and, for the first time, did not feel small. In the very middle of a party full of people who treated me like a stain, a powerful woman had openly defended me. The slow flame in my chest finally caught wind, and I knew. Tonight, the scales of justice had begun to tip. The air in the hall shifted, as if crystal panes had cracked, and a cold wind rushed in. The music still played, but the violinist faltered, notes trembling and dying into tense silence. Evelyn Harper took the seat of honor, back straight, one hand resting lightly on the chair like a judge practiced in rulings. I still stood there, awkward, but she crooked a finger, her eyes not permitting refusal. I stepped forward, each footfall sounding wooden on stone. When I sat beside her, dozens of eyes shot toward us like arrows, but for the first time I did not lower my head. Evelyn spoke evenly, not loud but clear as a gavel in a courtroom. "I would like to ask, before I arrived, what did you all say to Mr. Hale?" The question sounded light, but struck squarely at Claudia and Robert. Claudia's smile hardened as she lifted her glass, voice honeyed, "Oh, just a small misunderstanding." "Perhaps he was uncomfortable with our arrangements?" Robert rushed in, voice hurried. "Yes." He was late, so some guests were inconvenienced. Evelyn tilted her head, her polite smile at odds with her cutting eyes. Inconvenienced to what extent? That I heard with my own ears he was told he was not qualified to sit with people? Or did I mishear? The entire hall went rigid. A few guests dropped their eyes to their glasses. Others coughed softly to avoid meeting anyone's gaze. Claudia flushed and gave a twisted smile. Mrs. Harper, surely Mr. Hale, misunderstood. What we meant was, Evelyn cut her off, voice like ice. I'm not asking about intentions. I am asking about actions, and those are clear. She turned to the crowd. Did you hear it? A frozen beat held the room. Then nods and whispers began to spread. Those who had witnessed me being pushed aside no longer dared to hide it. Robert banged his glass hard on the table, trying to regain authority. Madame, we have family standards, event standards. We only want to maintain our image. Evelyn let out a slight laugh, a cold sound no one dared to echo. Standards? She repeated the word slowly, as if dissecting a wound. What standards allow a family to humiliate a man who just helped someone else? What standards allow you to forget that a person's value lies in kindness, not in the price of a photo frame? The questions hung in the air, but like a blade aimed straight at Claudia's heart. Her hand trembled, wine rippling over the rim. Emily sprang up, her voice choked. Mrs. Harper, thank you. I begged my father to come only so he wouldn't feel abandoned. But she broke off, tears streaming. Charles pulled his wife back into her seat, hissing resentfully, Be quiet. You're embarrassing the family. Evelyn shot him a quick look, enough to silence him, his face turning paper white. Then she turned to me. Mr. Hale, please say clearly. How did they treat you when you first walked in? I hesitated, not wanting to make myself the center, but Evelyn laid a light hand on mine, as if lending me strength. I drew a deep breath and looked straight at Claudia and Robert. They told me I wasn't worthy to sit at the same table. They called my gift petty and laughed at my work as a mechanic, and they have never forgiven me for refusing to sell Martha's land, simply because I wanted to keep it as my late wife's last memory. The hall erupted in sharp whispers. A few guests murmured, "So it was because of that." Evelyn nodded as if she had already known. "Then it's clear." Not only contempt, but retaliation. He wouldn't sell his wife's memory, and you turned that into a crime. Robert blanched. Claudia clutched the chair, and Charles dropped his head. Evelyn rose, her voice booming in the hushed room. "I came tonight expecting a warm family celebration. Instead, I found a public trial, where a father is humiliated simply for living by his conscience. If this is how you treat your own in-law, I must ask, how can I trust tens of millions of dollars to people who despise human dignity?" Her words crashed like thunder. Some guests immediately set down their forks. A few stood, eyes indignant. Claudia's face went pale as she forced a smile. "Mrs. Harper, there must be a misunderstanding." But Evelyn raised a hand, cutting in. "No, I am not mistaken. And if I am still your guest, then respect the truth I just heard." In that moment, the banquet felt entirely like a courtroom. Evelyn sat as judge, Claudia and Robert as defendants, and I, the man once treated like a criminal, had become the key witness. No one dared laugh. No one dared whistle. Only a thick silence remained, tightened by every word from Mrs. Harper. And I knew, from this second, everything had changed. The birthday party was no longer Claudia's celebration. It had become a covert court where honor, dignity, and the Vanette family's future would soon be decided. The air in the hall was so dense that everyone could hear the pendulum clock ticking on the wall. The scents of wine, expensive perfume, and candles mingled, but could not mask the hovering tension. Claudia tried to smile, but the muscles in her face trembled, like thin paint hiding a cracked wall. Robert braced his hands on the table, breathing hard, sweat beading on his brow. Evelyn sat straight, her cold gaze sweeping the room as if everyone owed her an answer. I remained silent, but inside I felt as if I had been pulled from darkness into light, so bright it was hard to believe. An elderly guest, a longtime partner of Vanette Construction, spoke cautiously. "Forgive me, but when Mr. Hale walked in, I clearly heard the words, 'not worthy to sit at the same table.' If Mrs. Harper heard that, there's no way it was a misunderstanding." Many nodded. A few soft words of agreement rose. The wall of silence began to crack. Claudia's face drained, and Robert's grip on his crystal glass made the wine slosh over. "Enough!" Robert suddenly roared, his voice hoarse. "Yes, I said it. I can't stand the way he always acts morally superior, making us the villains. He wouldn't sell the land. He delayed the project. Cost my family months. Cost us millions. To me, he's not a hero. He's a burden." The room seemed to explode at his words. Guests who had been silent now buzzed, some shaking their heads, some exclaiming in shock. Claudia yanked her husband's sleeve, whispering desperately, "Robert, stop!" But it was too late. Robert panted, eyes red. "He thinks keeping land to honor his dead wife is noble? To me, it's stupid selfishness. He chose memories over helping his daughter have a better place in this family." Emily sprang up, her voice breaking. "My father is not selfish. He kept the land because it holds my mother's blood and tears. And you see everything as money." Tears flooded Emily's cheeks, her eyes blazing as if to tear the air apart. Charles tried to pull her down, but she yanked her hand away and shouted, "Enough, Charles!" "Every time I stayed silent to protect you, to protect your family. And today I watched my father humiliated before everyone. I will not be silent another second." The murmurs rose again, but no longer. Indifferent. Some guests looked at Emily with sympathy. A few clapped softly, approving her courage. Evelyn tilted her head, the corner of her mouth lifting. "At last, the truth shows itself. Mr. Vanette, thank you for confessing. You just admitted before all your partners that your family holds affection worthless and measures everything only by profit." Claudia stood trembling. Her voice rushed. "No, that is not it. only thought of Emily's and Charles's future. We wanted everything to be smooth for them. Mr. Hale is stubborn. Evelyn cut in, her tone sharp as a blade. He safeguards the memory of his late wife. That is called devotion. If you call it stubbornness, then we live in two different worlds. Applause broke out from the back of the room. A woman in a blue dress stood and spoke clearly. I have never met Mr. Hale, but I know this. A man who can spend hours on a highway helping a stranger and preserve his late wife's memory is not someone who deserves humiliation. The clapping spread, group by group, until the hall thundered. Robert and Claudia sat petrified, faces white like melting candle wax. I sat there, my heart pounding wildly. For years I had grown used to contempt and to being treated as an outsider. But now strangers, who minutes ago regarded me as an awkward bystander, were standing and applauding me. Emily turned and gripped my hand, her eyes shining with faith and pride. Evelyn rose, her voice ringing. I think we have heard enough. This is no longer a birthday. This is a trial the Vennet family staged, and they have just lost. She turned to me, laying a hand on my shoulder, warm yet firm. Mr. Hale, tonight you have been vindicated, and those who scorned you will pay, not only in honor, but in their careers. In that instant I saw clearly. The confession that just burst from Robert's own mouth did not only shatter the party, it buried the glittering mask the Vennet family had worn for years, and I knew this was only the beginning of the collapse. The rolling applause still echoed off the high ceiling, mingling with the sparkle of crystal chandeliers. But this time it was not for the Vennet family. It was for the man they deemed not worthy to sit at the same table. I sat there, holding my daughter's hand, filled with a strange feeling, as if the whip of humiliation had turned into a crown of honor. Robert lowered his head, his face flushed with rage and shame. Claudia's hand shook around her glass, then slipped. The glass fell and shattered on the floor, shards of crystal scattering like fragments of broken honor. Evelyn Harper stood, her presence silencing the hall. She walked slowly to the center, her heels striking the marble like a judge's gavel. Her eyes swept every face, from dark-suited partners to elegantly dressed ladies, all tracking her every move. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, I did not come tonight just for a party. I came to observe a family I had considered partnering with. I wanted to know how they treat their own, to understand how they would treat partners. And I have my answer. A pause. Then she continued, each word carved in stone. The Vennet family may build high-rises and hold millions, but they have revealed a harsh truth. They despise human dignity. A father is humiliated simply for guarding his wife's memory. A gift is mocked because it lacks monetary value. That is not only heartless, it is a fatal lack of wisdom. Robert sprang to his feet, his voice trembling. Mrs. Harper, please don't rush to a conclusion. This was just a moment of anger, a misunderstanding. Evelyn turned to him, her gaze so cold it choked him. A misunderstanding? You just admitted in front of everyone that you resent Mr. Hale for daring to keep that piece of land. You called devotion selfishness. That is not a misunderstanding. It is the truth. And that truth tells me I cannot place my trust in your family. Murmurs rose, a few guests standing outright. A salt-and-pepper-haired businessman spoke up. If Mrs. Harper pulls her investment, I have no reason to stay either. Another nodded. I will not partner with people willing to humiliate their own in-laws. If they can betray family, they can betray partners. Those voices were hammers, striking the crack wider. Claudia panicked and hurried to Evelyn, her voice almost pleading, Mrs. Harper, please reconsider. We have been preparing for this deal. My family. Charles. Emily. But Evelyn stepped back gently, keeping her distance, her voice ice cold. I do not invest in numbers. I invest in people. And tonight, I saw the people your family really are. I am sorry, but Harper and Company Ventures will not work with Venet construction. Not now, not ever. The words fell like a final sentence. Murmurs turned to a chaotic buzz. A few guests quickly pulled out phones, sending messages. I could see Robert drained of all color, while Claudia staggered like someone who had lost her soul. Charles sat frozen, still clutching Emily's hand, but my daughter tore free, ran to me and threw her arms around me, sobbing, "Dad, I'm sorry. I let you endure this alone for too long." I held her tight and whispered, "It's all right, Emily. I'm here, like I promised." Evelyn turned to the room, her voice warmer. "But don't mistake this. Tonight is not only about collapse. Tonight is also about vindication." A father, Martin Hale, proved that value lies not in assets, but in dignity. And I believe you all see that applause exploded, ringing out, no longer timid but strong and resolute. I sat there holding my daughter, looking at every face around us. Those who had mocked me now avoided my eyes. Those who had whispered now nodded in respect. In that moment, I understood. The verdict Evelyn pronounced was not only for the Venet family. It was for anyone who believed money was the only measure. And for me, tonight was not only the washing away of shame. It was proof that the promise I once made to my daughter, the promise to always be there, had been kept, even when every door seemed to slam shut. The crystal lights still glittered on the high ceiling, but the hall was no longer lively. Guests rose one by one, gowns sweeping the stone floor, dress shoes tapping, goodbyes mingling with low, indignant whispers. They left in groups, abandoning half-finished glasses of wine and cooling plates of food. No one cared about the towering birthday cake still standing in the corner, its candles flickering in the conditioned air, ready to gutter out. Claudia awkwardly tried to hold on to each person, her hands shaking as she touched theirs, her voice breaking. "Please don't rush off. We can discuss this. It was only a moment's misunderstanding." But limp handshakes and averted gazes said everything. A middle-aged man merely bowed his head coldly. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Venet." Trust cannot be bought back. Then he turned and left. Claudia collapsed into a chair, her face pale, her makeup cracking under the lights. Robert slumped at the head table, eyes bloodshot, crushing his glass as if to powder it. He growled, "Because of one old mechanic, because of him, our biggest investment has vanished. If Harper pulls out, other funds will be wary. Without capital, our unfinished projects will bury us." His voice wavered like a cornered animal. A few leftover shards from the broken glass glittered at his feet, reflecting the downfall closing in. Emily still stood beside me, hand not letting go. My daughter trembled, but her eyes were steady. Charles stepped forward, face flushed, voice bitter. "Are you proud of yourself? You just cost this family its biggest financial backer. If Harper pulls out, other investors will turn away too." Emily spun on him, tears shining but voice firm. "No, Charles. Your family lost it yourselves, not me. If you have any conscience left, you should understand that arrogance and greed destroyed everything. My father is only a mirror reflecting your family's true face." The air was heavy as lead. Robert slammed his hand on the table. The glass tipped, and red wine splattered like fresh blood across the white cloth. He shouted, "Enough! This house doesn't need cheap moralizing. We need power. We need profit. And you," his cold eyes snapped to me, voice cracking with frenzy, "you ruined everything." Claudia grabbed him, afraid he might lunge. But the rage had no authority left. It was only the howl of failure echoing through the grand villa. Evelyn Harper remained seated, quietly witnessing. She said nothing more. She didn't need to. Her power now lay not in shouting, but in a silence that made every excuse meaningless. I glanced over and found her eyes on me, not pitying, but recognizing. Charles gripped Emily's arm, his voice choked. "Choose. Will you stand with your father, a poor old man, or stay with this family and everything we have in our building?" Emily went still, then slowly withdrew her hand from his. her eyes bright like a freshly lit candle. Charles, everything we have is only paint. When the paint peels, and what remains is rot, I choose my father, and I choose the truth. A sob rose sharp in my throat. I squeezed my daughter's hand, overwhelmed by a lightness I had never felt. This was not only vindication, but a bond soldered back together from what had broken. Most guests had left. The hall was washed in harsh white light, chairs knocked askew, tables littered. Outside, night draped the garden. A cold wind pushed through the wide windows, rustling leaves like a farewell. Claudia's 60th birthday, meant to be a golden night, had become a night of judgment. I stood holding Emily close. Before leaving, I looked back at Robert, Claudia, and Charles. 3 figures sunk in their own shadows, each wearing a different mask: fury, despair, ruin. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Silence was the heaviest sentence. Stepping out, the night wind rushed in with the scent of wet grass and jasmine from the garden. I breathed deep, my heart light, as if a boulder had finally rolled off. Emily squeezed my hand and whispered, "Dad, I'm proud of you." I smiled, eyes stinging. "I only kept my promise, Emily. I promised to be here when you needed me." And that night, amid the Venet's crumbling darkness, I knew real light had returned to us. The road away from the Venet estate was quiet, lined with old cypresses standing like silent witnesses. My battered Ford stood out like an odd stray among the luxury cars. But tonight, I felt no shame. Every scratch on the body, every rumble of the engine was proof that I had lived true to myself, owing no one's grandeur. Emily sat beside me in silence for a long time. As the car rolled through the gates, she whispered, "Dad, I'm sorry I let you endure all of this. I knew they looked down on you, but I never imagined to that extent." I set my hand over hers, my voice low but firm. "You don't need to apologize. They looked down on me because I wouldn't sell your mother's land. After all, I wouldn't walk their path of greed. But tonight showed this. Without money, I still kept what is most precious, the promise I made to you." We drove through empty streets, the streetlights casting dim yellow across the windshield. Emily rested her head on my shoulder, eyes half closed as if a burden had lifted. A memory stirred in me. The first time I took her to kindergarten, her tiny hand clinging to mine, afraid to get lost. Today, after many years, she still held my hand, not out of fear, but out of pride. The next morning, the city newspaper exploded with headlines. "Harper and Company withdraws. Venet project on the brink of crisis." Analysts warned that without replacement capital, the entire expansion plan would stall, with half-finished projects at risk of being liquidated. It was not an immediate knockout, but enough to make a family once seated on the throne tremble before the storm. My phone rang constantly, not from Robert or Claudia, but from old friends, neighbors, even former colleagues at the machine shop. They had seen the footage from the parties someone had recorded on a phone and posted online, showing Claudia humiliating me and Evelyn Harper standing up to defend me. They sent words of support. "You preserve dignity for all of us, the working people who have always been looked down on." I read each message, tears of warmth welling up. I realized this story was not mine alone, but the story of everyone who had ever been belittled. As for Emily, she decided to take an extended leave from Charles's company and move back into my home for a while. That first morning, as she stood in the kitchen brewing me a cup of coffee, sunlight pouring through the window, I suddenly glimpsed Martha's presence, gentle, quiet, steadfast. In that moment, I understood. Family is not contracts or investments, but the people willing to stand by you when the whole world turns away. A week later, I received a message from Evelyn Harper. Just one sentence. "People of good character are never alone." "We will meet again," I smiled, sensing an invisible thread had opened, not only for me, but also for Emily's future. On the weekend night, father and daughter sat on the porch, listening to the chorus of insects. Emily squeezed my hand. Dad, because of that night, I finally understand what value truly is. They can own money, mansions, luxury cars, but you have something they can never buy, the respect of those who see the heart. I nodded, my eyes gazing into the distance. Life will take away many things, Emily, but if we keep our character and our family, we will never be empty-handed. And so what seemed to begin with nothing more than a broken car on the highway ended with a simple lesson. Justice does not always need a courtroom, only a moment that strips away pretense. In the darkness, I felt it clearly. The losses were no longer burdens. They were stepping stones for me and my daughter to begin a new journey, a journey guided by truth and kindness. And that is how a father's simple promise, together with a small act on the highway, turned a lavish birthday party into an unexpected tribunal of justice. The Vanette family may still have money and reputation, but that night they lost what mattered most, trust and respect. And I, once scorned, regained what was most precious, the bond with my daughter, and the truth that character cannot be bought with money. If you have ever been looked down on for your background or your work, would you walk away in silence, or would you stand and turn humiliation into a weapon that makes the arrogant pay? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly want to know. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications because there are more stories I will tell. Stories proving that the scales of justice tip at the most unexpected moments. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.